Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. We are on episode 26. We are still in the middle of some serious Godzilla versus Kong coverage. So, naturally, I have returning to the show again, Travis Martinez. Travis, welcome back.
Always glad to be back. I love talking movies.
So, we're on the third round here of Godzilla versus Kong. We're going to be talking about the modern films, or what most fans would call the Monsterverse. But first, we've got lots of news to cover this week. It was actually a pretty big news week. I had to cut a lot of stuff down, but we're going to start with a big movie delay. One just cracks me up every time because this movie has gone back and forth a lot since last year. Peter Rabbit 2, which had been moved up to May 14th, has now once again been moved back to July 2nd. And I, once again, will state, why don't they just put this film on some kind of streaming service for Easter? It is obviously an Easter movie. I don't get it. So we'll see. I'm really hoping we're getting to the last round of movie delays coming up as we start to see more and more people get vaccinated. Moving on to some DC movie-related news. Promising young woman director Emerald Fennell is going to be writing Zatanna for DC, and that's cool. That's a fun character from DC Comics, and good to see them start getting into their magical characters the way Marvel has been doing the past few years. We're also going to get Dr. Fate in the Black Adam movie, so woo! And hopefully it's going to be some much better magic than we got out of Suicide Squad, the first Suicide Squad. Speaking of DC, despite the fact that the Snyder Cut of Justice League launched last week, or not last week, the week before, it launched recently. The point is, it was very successful for HBO. Despite this, Warner Brothers has said that they are not going to continue forward with any plans for continuing the so-called Snyderverse. They're going to keep going with sort of more solo-driven films and kind of branch out from there, which kind of sucks because I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I did see the Snyderverse, and it actually sets up a much better story in the Snyder Cut than the original Whedon Cut. And these guys kind of feel like, oh man, where would have they gone from here? Because they definitely had big plans. I can say that. Moving on to a new monster movie rumors. Greg Nicotero and Robert Rodriguez have apparently been discussing remaking The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Ooh. It's literally just a discussion, though. There's been no actual talks with Universal Pictures. It should also be noted that Creature from the Black Lagoon has been rumored to have been in the remake phase for the last 10 years. At one point with Scarlett Johansson attached to star in the film. So, we'll see if it ever actually happens. In video game movie news, Chad Stahelski, who directed, I believe, the first 3 John Wick films, is set to helm a film based on the PlayStation game Ghost of Tsushima, which is a samurai revenge story. So that should be interesting. Kind of weird that they're making a movie that is based on a game that is based on old samurai movies. That's just the circle of life for you, I guess. And finally, what is definitely the biggest news of the week. Talked about Black Widow coming out in May just last week. Well, guess what? It got delayed until July, and it is going to debut on Disney Plus with premiere access, day and date. So I think they're doing this just because by July, hopefully more people will have gotten their shots. We'll be that much closer to herd immunity, and people might be that much more comfortable going out to see a movie in the theater. And for those who aren't, they'll at least be able to finally watch it on Disney Plus. Travis, by July, do you think you'd be ready to see Black Widow in the theater?
By July?
Yeah.
I feel like by then it'd be a good bet to say like I would be vaccinated and I'd feel more comfortable. I do feel like at that point people would still probably wear a mask. I would probably still wear a mask except for when I'm eating, but I feel like that's a reasonable time where I feel comfortable.
Yeah, given earlier this year, we talked about how we probably weren't going to be too comfortable going to movie theaters until November, December. But given how much faster the vaccination rate has been, much faster than I think we originally thought. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a situation where you're still going to want to wear masks because there's probably still going to be people there who aren't vaccinated or who, you can still always pass it along. You just aren't going to get quite as bad symptoms.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that because what else was I gonna say about this? Yeah, I do agree. Like we're at a very good pace to get vaccinated. I remember talking, I think, to a few people. Like there was the plan that by Biden, like everybody be vaccinated by May. Very ambitious goal, but with the rate, it's possible. We'll see. I'm hoping. I miss theaters so much.
Yeah, I miss cinema. I miss theater. As I've said, we're both theater people. We want to get back on stage, and that's probably going to be even longer out than going to see movies.
It's like radio shows be nice, but nothing will be actually being there interacting with people.
Yep. So that has been the news for the week. So we're going to talk about what we've been watching the last week. Travis, were you able to get any free time to watch anything this week, or are you a busy boy again?
Anything new, or the movies related to our video?
Anything new, or just something unique, not related to what we're going to talk about, though.
I guess you could technically say it's related because it's a giant monster. I finally watched The Meg because I had some time there, and I was like, I wanted to watch something new. I wanted to watch something dumb. I knew The Meg was going to be dumb, so I watched it. Was not disappointed.
It is an absolute blast. What a film.
I was pretty upset when I found out that it's based off a book, and in the first book, the Meg fought a T-Rex because I feel ripped off in the film now.
I think it's a series of books, actually.
I believe so. But yeah, no, it was just like it knew it was just a big budgeted B movie, so it was just completely crazy. I think Honest Taylor said it best. They gave us the film and the sequel in one because of how a second shark comes out of nowhere whatsoever. Spoiler warning, I guess, for anybody who hasn't seen it. But at this point, are you worried about being spoiled about a giant shark movie?
You really shouldn't be at this point.
The film's like a few years old now. It's like if you haven't seen it by now, it's on you.
That's a good one. Well, like I said earlier, I finally sat down. I watched the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I thought it was going to be a 2-night endeavor. I actually did it in one sitting, minus the occasional extended break for snacks and bathroom stuff, because it is actually a 4-hour film. But I was shocked. I was shocked at how much better it was than the theatrical cut. I did not think that just adding more into it was going to make it better, but somehow it did. And they did fix Steppenwolf looks a lot better this time around. There's still some really, really noticeably bad special effects shots, but it's overall it's just a much better experience. And I think I'm going to try and I know a few people who watch it, so I'm going to try and see if I can get some people on board to talk about that at some point. So I won't say too much more about it.
Yeah. I was not surprised when I heard it was 4 hours because I remember hearing that it was going to be a 2-parter, Justice League Part 1 and 2. So when they're like, it's 4 hours, I'm like, I'm not that surprised. I already knew it was going to be 2 movies.
Yeah. And again, I'm so curious as to what, like they've talked about what, the next Justice League movie would have been if they kept going, but it's like, I really want to see it now.
I did hear somebody online bring up a point like, if they want, they could do the Snyderverse on HBO and do their other universe in theaters, separate the two, make double the money.
I mean, that's one way they could go about it. It's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to Warner Brothers. Right now, they're not budging. So But we're not talking about superheroes today. We're talking about giant monsters. So, as we've been discussing the last couple of weeks, we are building up to Godzilla versus Kong. We are officially, as of this recording, 3 days out. By the time this episode drops, it'll be 2 days out, or 1.5 days, depending on if you're going to be, like possibly like me and watching it at midnight on HBO. So we've talked about classic Godzilla. It is time to talk about the three films that are leading up to where we are now. That is Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and Godzilla King of the Monsters. Mm-hmm. So let's start in 2014 with Godzilla. So this film was directed by Gareth Edwards, and it stars Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen just a year before they appeared together again in Avengers. Bryan Cranston, Ken Watanabe, Sally Hawkins, David Strahan, and Juliette Binoche. So that pretty much rounds up the main cast of this film. In a plot that's not terribly far removed from what you'd expect from a Godzilla movie. It doesn't feel like an origin film, because this film establishes that Godzilla has been around since the 50s, just hasn't appeared on land in all that time. So it doesn't really feel like an origin movie per se, just maybe an origin in the sense that this is the first time civilization has come into contact with Godzilla. But first off, we have the new villain in this film. They're just called the Mutos, which is sort of a general name in this franchise for massive. Was it massive? Is it underground? No. Shoot, I forgot what Mutos stands for. Massive unknown terrestrial organism, I believe, is what it is. And these creatures in this film are sort of...
Yeah, you were right. I just looked it up. Massive unidentified terrestrial organism.
So the creatures in this film are both bat-like and sort of insect-like. They're really hard to describe, but it starts out with a Muto basically destroying a nuclear power plant in Japan in 1999, tragically killing off Juliette Binoche's character like right away. Sandra Brody is her name, and so we flash forward several years later. Bryan Cranston, who plays her husband Joe, is still in Japan trying to figure out what happened at the power plant that day. And his son Ford, who is in the years since joined the military, he has to go over and get his dad out of prison in Japan because he's been trespassing on, this nuclear plant that's supposed to be off limits because of the radiation. So they investigate. They find out that the radiation is actually gone, and that an organization is observing something there, and that happens to be the Muto, which is in its dormant sort of larval phase, and it hatches, and it starts to head across the water towards, they're coming to America. I think that's the whole point of finally making a Godzilla movie in America, is to get these monsters to come here. And we find out that this organization is called Monarch. It's headed by Ken Watanabe's Dr. Ishiro Serizawa. They tell Ford about Godzilla, about how the nuclear tests in the 50s in the Pacific were not actually tests. They were trying to kill Godzilla, this strange creature that has appeared out of nowhere. So, long story short, the monsters show up in San Francisco. Another Muto appears in Vegas. They all converge in San Francisco and have a crazy battle. Elizabeth Olsen is Elle Brody, Ford's wife, and she is spending so much time running from monsters and just trying to protect their child. This was such a fun film to watch in the theater in 2014. It was interesting that it got overall a really good reception from critics and a really mixed reaction from audiences. Mostly complaining that there wasn't enough Godzilla in this film, and it's that part of that is intentional, because this film was definitely trying to play more of a Jaws type. They literally have said Jaws was a huge inspiration for this film. So let's not show the monster for a lot of it. And I appreciate that. I think it makes for good storytelling. But I understand we are in an era where in Hollywood, particularly with Hollywood films, you kind of want to show off everything that you possibly can. Travis, what did you think of Godzilla?
Um, I thought it was a pretty decent movie. I am one of like the audience members where it's just like the film kind of advertised itself as like Godzilla versus like Bryan Cranston, because they heavily featured him. And that was actually one of my biggest complaints too, as like they kill off Bryan Cranston like a third of the way in. And I like Aaron Taylor Johnson, but I'm sorry, Bryan Cranston is like so much more entertaining to me. But I do find like it is a well-made movie, but I do wish that there was more monster fighting and stuff like that, because that's what you go to a Godzilla movie for. And I don't think, as it is, it would be as bad, but there's a trend in monster movies a lot lately, especially in the Godzilla ones. Both this and King of the Monsters had it, where like right before the monsters are about to fight, they cut away to human characters, and it's especially more evident in the first movie. Overall, like I said, I enjoyed it. I just wish there was a bit more for what people came to see.
What is actually interesting about that is someone on Reddit actually compiled a list of how much screen time Godzilla has in every film up through this one. This list was compiled in 2017, so it doesn't include King of the Monsters, and it doesn't include the 3 animated Netflix films. And this film, of the 31 films, this one ranks, where is it? Number 22, with Godzilla having 9 minutes and 56 seconds of screen time. Mm-hmm. The biggest offender is actually Invasion of Astro Monster, or Godzilla versus Monster Zero, with Godzilla only having 5 minutes and 43 seconds of screen time. The original Gojira, Godzilla only has 8 minutes and 44 seconds of screen time. The number 1 film is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the 1993 version. Godzilla has 26 minutes and 56 seconds of screen time. So Godzilla has never, I don't know about King of the Monsters, Godzilla, but out of all these films, Godzilla has never had more than 30 minutes of screen time, which is crazy to think. Mm-hmm. I think I will say it is probably more apparent in this film than in a lot of the Japanese films, because most of the Japanese films don't run much longer than 90 minutes. About 100 minutes is the longest you get out of a Japanese Godzilla film. Yeah. This film is almost 2 hours, so that's, as a percentage, you're still getting a lot less.
And I think another thing that might help, but I don't know if this is included in the guys thing, because when watching Godzilla 2014, majority of the time we mostly see his like spikes coming out of the water. We don't really get to see the actual full Godzilla till much later. So I don't know if that's also taken that into consideration, that even the parts that we do see him, we barely see him at all.
I'm thinking it might actually be taking that into consideration, because most of the other sources that I looked at, including like IMDb, cite Godzilla as having 11 minutes of screen time. So that's basically a full minute more. So I think that they're including basically full-on moments of Godzilla, as opposed to what you're talking about there with like just the spikes in the water. What I do really appreciate about what they did with this film is there's some really amazing dramatic moments.
Oh yeah,
where you can't see the monsters. And you're right, it is kind of like that crazy moment where you're just like, ooh, big reveal, there's the monster, and all of a sudden they cut away. Mm-hmm. But I love the moment where they cut back to Elle back in the States, and her little boy is watching the news on TV, and he's watching it all live. And like that's crazy to imagine. Like that's like, us watching, a natural disaster happening on the news, or just any kind of disaster. And just walking and realizing, oh my gosh, this is happening real time. I love I think the coolest and probably most tense moment in the film actually doesn't even have Godzilla. It's when they are checking the bridge so they can get the bomb across on the train, and the Muto like gets right up next to them, right up next to Ford, and he's just lying on the train tracks on the bridge. I thought that is a truly scary moment.
Yeah, no, this film did have some really good scenes that barely showed. Because I also, thinking about it, that one scene where they're jumping out of the plane and you're getting a first-person perspective of the soldier, seeing all of the stuff was also very tense, and the music also really helped it in that scene. Because this film, I felt, did have some pretty good music for certain scenes.
Yeah, that's another great scene. I love that where they just you see it diving down and literally brushing right past Godzilla and thinking, oh my gosh, what if someone hit them? Like that would be a disaster. So yeah, and like the scene at the very end where poor Ford is just sitting there on the boat and all he has is his little handgun, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna die, so I'm just pulls his handgun up, and it's sort of a last act of defiance to the Muto before Godzilla shows up. And the thing about the slow burn though is it also makes those really exciting moments, just incredible. Like when I saw it in the theater, the audience just cheered because they knew it was coming as soon as the tail started lighting up. And he only uses his flame breath like 3 times in this movie, but every time was like, oh, that's so cool.
Just that final move he had on the final Muto, like where he does breathe it directly into his mouth, severing its head. That was like one of the coolest moments in Godzilla. Like I said, I haven't seen every Godzilla movie, but even if I do, I'm pretty sure that would still at least be within the top 10 coolest moments.
It really, I love the Japanese movies, but they never do anything quite that epic.
I think it's also because the Japanese films are dealing with actors in suits, so they also have to take actor safety, whereas this is CGI, so they have a bit more freeway to be more graphic and do some more stuff.
Oh yeah, easily. They can do a lot more stuff. I do love the design of Godzilla in this film, and that carries over into King of the Monsters as well. Just this massive, just beast. I think it's the biggest you'll ever see Godzilla. But it's one thing I think they got right in this film as opposed to the 98 film, because the monster in the 98 film is swift, it's agile. This one is Godzilla. Godzilla is supposed to be slow and lumbering, a little swift with the tail. Always needs to be swift with the tail, but otherwise Godzilla is not supposed to be fast.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, this one definitely felt like they learned a bit from that version, and they definitely modeled him much closer to what Godzilla would look like, but like their own take on it. I did like the design. It kind of gave me like a kind of feeling like a bear, sort of. Like when a bear stands up, his legs are like always so thick in order to support all the weight with all that. I kind of got that feeling when I saw this Godzilla. Yeah, the Godzilla design was really good. I will admit, though, the Muto designs were pretty lackluster for me. Like, they looked pretty generic.
Yeah, and I know unfortunately, I think that's kind of the point, was to have Godzilla face off against a generic kind of monster to start off. I know there was originally a plan for it to actually be King Ghidorah in this film, but they decided to cut it because they wanted to go with a more focused, down-to-earth, wrath of nature type storyline. which actually I think works. I think this also would have been just as good of a movie if it had just been Godzilla versus nothing, just Godzilla versus humans.
Yeah. I can still see why they would want to keep a monster in there because I know even though it's like in his first film he didn't fight a monster. At this point he's known for it, so I think they felt like they had to throw something in there for him to fight. No, my favorite thing about the Mutos though is like most people compare him to the Cloverfield monster and how they have a very similar looking feel to him.
No, they kind of do actually. Now that I think of, now that you mention it, yeah.
They kind of have like the same body structure where they're like lumbering over with their arms just super long and all that.
And speaking of Cloverfield, I think that actually is a movie that heavily inspired Godzilla. In some points, is obviously Cloverfield is a found footage monster film.
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla may not be found footage, but there are a lot of those moments, and it's those moments right before they cut away. But it always seems to be like those moments where L's looking out from the bunker and looking up at Godzilla as the Muto flies into him, and then, like you said, we cut away. But there are a lot of great point of view shots in this film that do give it that sort of documentary vibe to it. And going back to what you said earlier, though, I totally agree. This film could have been advertised a little bit better because I think we all thought Bryan Cranston was going to be in it for a lot longer. It was kind of a shock to see him go so soon.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those just like they bait you in, but they could only afford him for so much, so they showed as much as they could. Because they're just like, all right, Bryan Cranston, come get your check.
But talk about the rest of the cast for a minute. I really love that they had Ken Watanabe in there as Dr. Serizawa. What a great choice.
Mm-hmm. He's very such a talented actor. I love him and a few other things. Plus, I can't really see many other people deliver that infamous line, "Let them fight," as well as him.
Yeah, he really brings a gravity to that character, and I appreciate that they sort of link his character to the 1954 era with the Watch. Mm-hmm. And then to have Sally Hawkins in there, it's so crazy that this film is filled with like all this, all these Academy Award nominated actors, and then you have, of course, Aaron Johnson and Lizzie Olsen, who and for Lizzie Olsen, this is like her first big. She'd done like a handful of movies before, but this was easily her biggest movie until Avengers came along. It's crazy to look back on this movie now after everything she's done with Avengers and now WandaVision, and say, oh, this is where she kind of started with the blockbuster thing. You never would have thought.
Yeah, it is always funny looking back at this movie, like you said, after watching Marvel, because I think even when when her first Marvel movie came out, Avengers: Age of Ultron, people were like, a year ago, her and Aaron Taylor Johnson were playing husband and wife, and now they're playing siblings, which was a funny connection.
Yeah. And like really, Aaron Taylor Johnson wasn't that well known outside of Kick-Ass and maybe a few other films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even to this day, I think I still only know him from this and Kick-Ass. No offense to the actor or anything like that. It's just I can't really think of anything else he's been in. I'm sure he's done a lot, of course.
And of course, there's the director Gareth Edwards, who, for all the criticisms people lay on this film, it's like this is the reason that he got to do Rogue One, and I think Star Wars fans are forever grateful for that film. Mm-hmm. So this is basically how this new American monster franchise got started. So it took a few years, but they finally made a Kong film. So Kong Skull Island. Now, originally, I was reading up on this. Originally, it was supposed to be set in 1917, and then the director Jordan Roberts, um, he decided Jordan Vogt Roberts, pardon me, he came to them and said, "I want to do this film set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War," and Warner Brothers really liked that idea, and obviously that's where it went. So we get a very different King Kong film.
Mhm.
I think this take on Kong is even more different than this take on Godzilla. Because this time around we don't have a film crew going to make this spectacular adventure film on a remote island. We actually have Monarch, the organization from Godzilla. We find out that they've been around for a while, and in this film, and I think this is a bit of inspired casting. They're led by John Goodman as Bill Randa. What a great role for him.
Mhm.
He gets to lend a little bit of his comedic chops to it. But he basically is asking the government to keep funding Monarch and to send them off on this mission to an uncharted island that they've just discovered and see if there's a monster on it. So we get another top-notch cast this time around. We get Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson, John C. Reilly, Corey Hawkins. Like it's crazy. Again, more Marvel talent. This was right around the time that we'd found out that Brie Larson was going to be in Captain Marvel. So it was kind of I kind of went to it thinking, okay, so it's Loki and Nick Fury and Captain Marvel
Mhm.
going off to fight a big ape.
And encountering a Nova Corps officer.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So what I love, and this film um, definitely takes inspiration from Apocalypse Now
Mhm.
and from the book that it's based on, Heart of Darkness, but particularly in the fact that Tom Hiddleston's character is named Conrad and Riley's character is named Marlowe. Anyone who's read Heart of Darkness could tell you, like, yep, there they are. They're right there. Um, so yeah, I think it's a really interesting take because it's the first time you see in a Kong movie a military operation going up against Kong on his home turf.
Mhm.
And unlike Godzilla, they get right to the action. About 5 minutes after they get onto the island, Kong shows up and is just wrecking their helicopters.
Mhm.
So, so you've got Tom Hiddleston as Conrad, who is sort of their tracker. Samuel L. Jackson as Colonel Packard, who is basically in charge of the military operation. Brie Larson is Mason Weaver, who is a photographer. John Riley is Marlowe. He has been stranded on the island since World War II. Um, so we start to find out, of course, that Packard is sort of stuck in that mind. He's one of those soldiers who isn't ready to leave the war. And of course, that he's especially burned by the fact that America lost the conflict in Vietnam, and he's there to kill. So as soon as he finds Kong, he finds his new enemy. So, and you've got Conrad, who seems like they're also not. Conrad feels like the type of character who's trying to escape war but can't. So those two characters have kind of an interesting parallel arc in which they're both stuck in the war and they both have a different attitude about it.
Mhm.
Um, I think this film kind of pulled the exact opposite of Godzilla. This film, I mean, it also did what the original film was. This is an adventure film through and through. It's
Mhm.
not trying to. It definitely does it definitely has that sense of we shouldn't be here. That same lesson that we get from other Kong films, but it's an adventure film. It's fun. I'd say it's a much more fun film than Godzilla. How would you think about it?
Yeah, this one definitely felt like it wasn't trying to be like as big as the original. Like with the Peter Jackson one, you can tell like they're trying to like recreate some of that same like movie magic of the 30s, whereas this one's just they're fully aware it's just there to be a fun movie. They're setting up the eventual uh, Godzilla versus Kong, and they just have fun with it. Like you said, there's definitely a lot more action. You definitely feel like you're with Kong a bit more in this. And I actually really do like the Vietnam setting and the backdrop of it. It just gives that whole feeling, especially with like more of the orange palettes, like that beautiful shot of the helicopters reaching to Kong, or first seeing Kong, and you just see the silhouette of him with the orange sun backlighting him. It definitely had so many beautiful moments. The characters, I do feel for the most part are lacking for me. There are some good ones in there. John C. Reilly really steals the show for me as someone who's like been trapped on this island obviously for decades and went completely batshit crazy. Like I think the funniest moment in the whole thing is when he's like talking to this one guy and he's just like, "I'm gonna cut you while you sleep." Then laughs as if it's a joke, but then goes straight back to like it being serious. He was just a fun character. I loved every second of him.
Yeah, once he shows up, which is probably close to about an hour into the film, maybe a little less, but yeah, it becomes his movie.
Yeah.
It becomes the story of him as finally escaping the island after 30 some years.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. You're absolutely right. One of the problems with this film is that outside of Conrad, Packard, Weaver, and Marlowe, you have all of these other soldiers, and they're just there to be soldiers. They're all archetypes of soldiers. You have the younger soldiers who are not as experienced. You have the older ones who like have this sort of father mentor mentality over the younger ones, because we all knew at the end when I can't remember the name of the character, but when the mother skull crawler, it's skull crawler, right?
Skull
Yeah. When the mother skull crawler finally shows up, and he just like it does the typical like Vietnam soldier thing with the two grenades, and he's like, "Come get me." It's like we all knew at one point like this one's gonna die. He's gonna do it. He's gonna make the noble sacrifice.
They do try to make you feel for them, but for the most part, you just can tell they're a bunch of red shirts. They're just there for the monsters to kill. However, I think one of my favorite of the other smaller soldiers, not because of his character, was I don't know the character's name, but the actor who played him was Toby Kebbell, who previously was in another Ape movie when he played Koba in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was a fun connection I saw. And I believe he even did the motion capture for Kong in this. I could be wrong.
He helped.
Yeah,
there are two motion capture actors who did Kong for this movie.
Just like I believe there was this one actor who also did some motion capture for the first Godzilla, slightly.
Yeah, Toby Kebbell's character, Chapman, his name's Chapman, has a little bit more depth to him, and tragically is one of the ones who dies a little early.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of characters dying, this film also like didn't pull punches with some of that stuff. Had some nice surprises. The spider monster in the bamboo forest was with the leg that goes straight through the soldier's head that was a shock to see in the theater.
It's like they really pushed what they could do with a PG-13 movie. It's like it's so funny. It's like they go so gory, but then it's like they don't give Samuel L. Jackson the courtesy to say his signature catchphrase. He only says half of it.
Yeah.
Just like they did with the after credits in Infinity War.
Yeah. And yeah, there are other monsters in this apart from Kong and the skull crawlers. There's that spider. There's one that's basically, there's a couple that don't really do anything, but they're still cool. Like I think I love the giant like yak monster that just comes out of the water. That's a nice moment. Um,
There was like a mantis thing that looked like it was like made out of wood or something,
yep.
or at least it was used that texture for camouflage.
There's a So this was actually improv. When John C. Reilly does that little monologue about, do you hear that up in the trees? It sounds like a bird. It's actually an ant. That was improv. It was basically he was trying to get the other actors to laugh, but they ended up keeping it in the film. And then there was this thought of we should put that monster in the film, but it's like, well, we don't have the budget to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that was really cool. I love that Mark Evan Jackson is in this film, and anyone who's ever watched Parks and Rec or Brooklyn Nine-Nine knows who I'm talking about. And it's like he's one of the scientists. I think he's the last scientist to die, actually. Like Kong kills him right at the end, but he's the one stubborn scientist who actually sticks with the soldiers and tries to kill Kong. And it's just like, oh my gosh, what are you doing in this film? And this is an interesting film because it's squeezed in between two Godzilla films that take place in the present day, but it's all part of the same franchise. So it helps it to feel very different from what we get in the Godzilla films.
Yeah.
Tonally, and like you said, with that color palette.
Yeah. I think I brought this up on a previous episode, or maybe it was just between the two of us. I think the reason for the 70s setting was because they had a quick throwaway line in there that the Kong in this movie was an adolescent, a child, which would explain how he can grow much later, so that way he can actually go toe-to-toe with Godzilla.
Yeah, because we've already seen it in the trailers. Kong is big now.
You can definitely tell he's a bit older because you even see like kind of like an old man beard on the new version. Actually, while we're on the subject, I actually really do like Kong's design here. It's like most of the previous Kong films from the 30s, 70s, and 2005, he's portrayed pretty much like a regular gorilla, hunched over, supporting its weight and all that. Whereas this one's more standing upright, probably for fighting reasons, obviously. It definitely makes you think more of like the Toho or King Kong in that manner.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's definitely going to be easier for him to fight on 2 feet. You're absolutely right there. What else do I want to say about this film?
I do like a bit of the backstory they have a bit with Kong. Like, they don't really go much to it in the movies. They just hint like all of his species has been killed off by skull crawlers. But I believe there was also a book tie-in that delved into it a bit more, where his whole species went off to fight like skull crawlers, and they kept him hidden away in a cave, but he still was able to see his family get killed. And that's why he hates like the military dropping bombs on his home, because like they're interfering with because this Kong, much like the Godzilla they set up in 2014, he's a protector of what he does. He protects the island. He doesn't care about the rest of the world, whereas Godzilla protects the world. Kong's just like, leave my island alone. Do not bring these skull crawlers up, or I will mess you up. Because that's species we didn't actually bring up, with the skull crawlers were like the big baddies of this movie. I really like their design too. They're like they kind of give me like a crocodile type vibe. They just have 2 arms, no legs, but a tail. Kind of an interesting design. I really enjoy it.
I was actually just reading up on their design earlier today, and apparently one of the inspirations for their design is actually from the original King Kong. It's the lizard that's crawling up the cliffside wall after Kong has dropped the log.
Yeah, I actually noticed that when I watched the 30s one. I was like, hey, that looks familiar.
So obviously these skull crawlers are much more agile and vicious. They are, and their design is they're pretty freaky.
Hmm.
I thought they do make for much more interesting villains than the Mutos, at least in terms of design.
Yeah,
Um,
and I definitely like how they are different because like they kind of give me the same feeling as like the plesiosaur from King Kong. You know how like that wrapped around Kong and all that. They kind of do a similar tactic here in this movie. So it's just like about matter of like Kong trying to figure out how to deal with these things that are like hard to like really like get a grip on.
Speaking of which, that fight at the end is
Mm-hmm.
really fun. A really fun fight between Kong and the big skull crawler.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you really get to see how this Kong uses his brain, and it's how it
Yeah.
implements the tools and the environment around him.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because
I find it,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find it a little bit unbelievable that he's able to hold Brie Larson, um, hold Mason Weaver in his hand while fighting single with one hand against the Skullcrawler. But it's a fantasy movie. I'll give it a little leeway there.
I mean, you also have to admit, like the previous Kongs have fought T Rexes, like the Peter Jackson one fought three with and in his hand.
That's true.
Um, my biggest problem is how his entire hand went inside the Skullcrawler with Brie Larson in his hand, and she suffered no damage from that.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy like Kong's creativeness with using like weapons, like when he like because they're badass and they show his ability to think, which we see in the trailers for Godzilla versus Kong. I think one of the coolest is there's two moments that really stick out when he grabs a tree and uses his hand to get rid of all of the side branches and all that, and just whacks the mute or Skullcrawler with it. Pretty cool. And also when he takes like a boat motor with a chain and he pretty much does a whole scorpion move, like get over here, and it.
Yep. It's a brutal finisher. It's a
Mhm.
really brutal finisher he pulls on that thing.
Yeah, because we see Kong do the same thing with the tree in some of the trailers for Godzilla versus Kong, and we also see him with like a weapon in the new film, but we'll talk about that film in a bit.
Yeah. Let's move on to the last film. Actually, we'll set it up here real quick because that final stinger at the end of Skull Island.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Marvel, for making these a reality. We have to sit through the credits now for just about every big movie we see. The end of Skull Island, we get to see cave paintings of Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah, and basically they were not being subtle. They were saying, "Hey, this is what's going to happen in the next movie," and that next movie is Godzilla, King of the Monsters, released just 2 years ago this May. But as we've discussed, feels like so much longer because we have been away from everything. This film, this film is basically the opposite of everything in the first Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much screen time Godzilla and the other monsters get, but it does feel like a greater percentage of overall. In this film, you have Kyle Chandler, you have Vera Farmiga, you have Millie Bobby Brown in her first movie. Ken Watanabe returns, as well as Sally Hawkins and David Strahan return. And so in this film, we have Vera Farmiga is a scientist who has a device that replicates the sort of bioacoustics of these giant monsters. And it falls into the hands of a eco-terrorist organization who wants to unleash the monsters in order to restore balance to the world, because mankind is, of course, destroying it. The big twist is, and this is the spoiler alert here, is that Vera Farmiga's character is actually on their side, and she has betrayed Monarch and her ex-husband. I don't know if they're divorced in the film. I'm gonna just assume they are. But she's betrayed Monarch, and all of her friends and co-workers. And then they unleash King Ghidorah, And that's when all hell breaks loose, because King Ghidorah, as it turns out, is not of this earth, and is not, does not have to follow the natural laws of earthbound monsters. And so after handily defeating Godzilla in the Antarctic, King Ghidorah goes on a rampage and becomes the alpha monster, and controls all the other monsters of the earth. And so, actually, no, he doesn't handily defeat Godzilla, because Godzilla is able to fight him again that one time in the ocean, and that's when they have the oxygen destroyer makes a big comeback. But basically, Godzilla is presumed dead. Godzilla is revived in a pretty cool way, and then of course we have, again, as always in the Godzilla film, the one final ultimate showdown. This time in Boston, of all places, which I thought was an interesting choice, because usually it's New York, usually it's a California city. Boston was a good choice. So I notoriously have difficulties with this film, because it's the opposite of the first film, and not because I definitely don't criticize it for having more monsters. For me, this film is rough because even though, like, we're not talking like Oscar caliber characters in the first film, this time around, I don't know what they were. I don't know. I just don't think these characters are that interesting, or well written. I think this plot is a little weird, a little silly, and that's coming from someone who loves all the Japanese films that are all very silly. What do you think, Travis?
It was definitely a major tone shift from the first movie. The first film set things up like they were like disaster movies, kind of, but with like what's what I'm looking for? I can't think of it, but like the first film definitely had a more serious tone where the monsters felt like animals, whereas this one definitely felt more like it was trying to be like one of the Japanese Toho films with their over exaggeration with the monsters. Now I love that part, but like you said too, what really hinders it is the human characters that you honestly don't like care about, like you don't really see what's going on in their minds and all that. And this film again has another same problem, not as bad as the first one with me, where it's like right when monsters about to fight, they cut away. But again, the problem with this one is like the human characters in the first were a bit more likable. You can follow them a bit more. These ones you're just like, oh my god, please just give us the monsters. That's what we want.
I think the problem is the characters in the first film are very much like characters in movies like Jaws, where they're grounded in reality, and you care about what's going on with them, And this time around, suddenly we have Monarch didn't seem like a huge organization in Godzilla, and even in Kong Skull Island, they're trying to get funding. And then all of a sudden in this film, over the course of 5 years, they all of a sudden have a flying fortress. They basically have a helicarrier.
And aren't there like two organizations now? Like a good one and a bad one?
I can't remember the name of the eco-terrorist organization is in the film. And it's led by by Charles Dance, who played Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones. And as soon as we knew he was in this movie, it was like, oh, he's going to be the villain. Everyone knew, and it was true. But yeah, it was like, wow, all of a sudden they have this giant flying fortress. They have an underwater base where they can observe Godzilla. It's like, where did they get all this stuff? When did this suddenly become like the Avengers of the Godzilla-verse? When it's, and like my favorite characters in this film are, I think Kyle Chandler does the best he can with what he has. I think he's doing. I think his character is one of the better new characters, but my favorite in this one is again Ken Watanabe as Dr. Serizawa. Brings it back to that grounded feeling, and it just really sucks that Sally Hawkins dies off like right away. this is right after she'd done Shape of Water, and it's like, oh, people know who she is now, and then you have to kill her. Because a lot of the new characters, we talked about how in Kong there were a lot of superfluous characters who were just sort of red shirts. In this one, you have a lot of new characters, and they're all these ridiculous caricatures. Bradley Whitford, amazing actor, West Wing, and he's brought on to be the really annoying comic relief. I got laughs in the theater, but it's just the stupidest. It's the stupidest joke is when someone says like, "Oh my God," and he goes Zilla. And it's like, oh no, you wrote that joke. Oh man. So yeah, it's rough because and I'm glad we're venturing a little bit into Godzilla versus Kong, but it's like I'm glad that almost everyone in this film, except for Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown, aren't coming back.
Is Millie Bobby not in the new Godzilla versus Kong? I thought she was.
She is. She and Kyle Chandler are the two that are coming back. Everyone else, and it's also and I love that Ken Watanabe, Dr. Serizawa, in a moment that mirrors the original film, gets to make a sacrifice, this time to save Godzilla instead of destroying him. I thought that was actually a really nice touch. On the flip side of that, though, we already had a noble sacrifice in this film. So by the time we get to the end and Emma Russell, Vera Farmiga's character, comes back to the the hero's side, it's like I didn't think she needed to make that noble sacrifice. I really feel like that was just a really, that was a way, just a really an easy out to get us to feel like that character has an arc.
Yeah, and even then, like, the plan didn't make sense because like she's just driving away on the ground to try to distract Ghidorah, but like just leave it on the ground, get on the plane, go, because it's like you're not really doing much at that point. I'm pretty sure Ghidorah can outrun a plane or a car.
I also just I never understood her character's motivations through this film because she wants this all starts because of the death of her son in the first film, and she wants to save the world by basically wiping out humanity. It's this film actually kind of basically is the Infinity War of Godzilla films. Like the human character's ultimate goal is to restore balance by destroying a part of humanity. So like, and I don't understand how, like, I get why the eco-terrorists could do it. They're bad. These people are just bad, but like, she's supposed to be a complex character and it didn't work for me.
No. Yeah, no, like we've talked about the human characters quite a bit. They just don't work. One thing I do want to talk about swapping is like what I really most enjoyed about this film is I like how they set up the Monsterverse ideas. Because I think they established there's like, 13, 15 titans, as they call them, which are the giant monsters.
Yeah, they're at least 15.
Yeah, because like we've seen Godzilla and we've seen Kong, but now they also establish more, which is like there's one less like a woolly mammoth, there's like a giant spider and all these other things. Rodan, Mothra also turn out to be two of them as well. I kind of like that world building a bit. I wish we got to see more of that throughout this film, like see more of the giant monsters and all that. But they're mostly just there, like Ghidorah's like he screams, they go on rampages in their own territories, and at the end they all bow to Kong or Godzilla. So yeah, that's something I wish we could have seen a bit more of.
Yeah, because the monster stuff that's there is a lot of fun. Seeing Rodan burst out of the volcano, and his fight with Ghidorah, which leads to another fight with Godzilla, that's really good. Mothra is really fun. But yeah, and there was a there's this question of like, do we try to get more of the classic monsters? It's like, oh man, that's rough because you got to pay more money to do that.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of these sort of throwaway monsters, which are really cool though. They're really good designs.
Yeah, most of them, they're really good and stick in your mind. I do like, however, they do, like you said, establish that Ghidorah, for example, is not of this earth. They even reference that very directly. He's like, he's a false titan. So maybe that could also set up, like, if any other future Godzilla villains show up, maybe they're all from space. So there's hope. We can see more.
And I mean, that was given that the first film is so grounded and realistic. The fact that they, and and as much as I appreciate that grounded, realistic approach, the fact that they kept Ghidorah's origins, the same as the Japanese films from space, was a really bold move, and I really appreciate that they did that.
And I also found it interesting because I don't remember if they established in this or if I'm just thinking of like I said, I haven't seen these films in a while. This is all just from memory. I think it was this film where they did establish that there was a war between multiple Godzillas and multiple Ghidorahs, similar to how there was a war between, because I think I remember there was like a mural or at some point at some film where we see a Godzilla being torn apart by at least a couple of Ghidorahs.
I don't think it's a couple of Ghidorahs, but I think that Ghidorah is a species that single-handedly wiped out several Godzillas.
Yeah.
It's tough to say.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen these films in a while. Like, I didn't have much time this week, so that's all from memory, but I do remember there being a history between the two species.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a history. In fact, the director Michael Dougherty has said the reason that Ghidorah is frozen in the Antarctic is because Godzilla trapped him there, centuries ago. Oh, that's such a cool scene too, is when Ghidorah first breaks through the ice. That moment is awesome. And then when Godzilla shows up to fight, the fact that they use the like classic music for Godzilla in this film is really cool. The classic theme whenever he shows up. The monster stuff in this movie is just so good. I just wish that everything else measured up.
Yeah. I also really dug the new designs for the Godzilla monsters. Like, I really like Ghidorah's like prehistoric type dinosaur type look. I like Mothra's little thingies, something like that. Some people didn't like that, but I was like, it's a nice touch. It gives them a way to be more interactive in the fights. And even then, Mothra's in butterfly form is still pretty good too, overall.
Oh yeah, the monster designs in this film are great.
Ronin, I feel like they did the best, but I don't know, it just didn't stick out with me as much as like Ghidorah or Mothra's design.
I mean, the only problem with Rodan is like Rodan, more than any other monster, is inspired by like a true life dinosaur. So it's not. So you have to kind of take a. I appreciate they took the liberty to like they added like fire to him in this movie, which was a nice touch. But other than that, it's like you can't really change that design.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Without changing the monster too much. Yeah.
It definitely makes you wish like they could get the rights to more Godzilla monsters to see what they could do with those versions, their versions of that. But at the same time, I understand this is like I'm pretty sure each one individually is so expensive.
Yeah, I can't wait to we get to the spoiler cast and we can start talking about, well, what do they do next? What monster can they bring up after this? Before I move on, there are two plot points in this film, and I want to bring them up because I feel like they were unfortunately used as fan service bait in this film, because this was the same year that we got Rise of Skywalker, and I feel like it was the year of fan service baiting films. This less so than Star Wars, but I definitely feel like they heavily used the oxygen destroyer in the advertising for this film. And when they got to it in the film, I was really disappointed that it was just a bomb. Like if not once you know the history of the actual weapon in the old films, it's like, oh man, like they really just threw it in there and it was kind of a throwaway plot device. That and burning Godzilla at the end of the film, because that was a huge plot point in Godzilla versus Destroy in 1995. The last film of that era before they were going to let Sony do their series, which only ended up being the one film. But Godzilla actually does have like a big meltdown at the end of that film. And in this one is like he turns red and they're like, hey everyone, Godzilla just turned into a nuclear bomb. He's about to blow. And it's like, and that didn't happen. It's like, did you just do burning Godzilla because it was done before? I don't know. The script on this film to me didn't quite work. But again, this film is a monster. This is a monster-heavy, fun film.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just sitting down here to watch this movie, The Monsters, you can have a good time. Let's talk about Easter eggs in these films, because there are quite a few, particularly in more so in King of the Monsters. Very early on in Godzilla, they actually tease Mothra when the Brody father and son go back into the ruins of their old house. There's a little fish tank that was supposed to have bugs in it, and just says Mothra on the tank. It's like, that was a nice touch.
Yeah. Kind of reminded me of Shazam a bit with the whole caterpillar scene.
Oh yeah. Then of course just the fact that it all sort of starts in 1954 is obviously a nod to the original film. Dr. Serizawa, of course, is an Easter egg himself. His first name in these movies is Ishiro, which is a nod to original Godzilla director Ishiro Honda.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of too many more Easter eggs in the original film.
Well, like you brought up, they still have the nuclear testing, but instead of it being used to create Godzilla, it's trying to be used to kill Godzilla. So I think that was a nice one. An Easter egg I've been noticing a lot is like there's always a train scene in a Godzilla movie that I've seen so far. Because like in the original 1950s one, we do see like Godzilla like pick up trains and seeing people fall, and like there is a train scene in the 2014 film where like it's being picked up and people are falling and all that.
That's true.
I feel like that could possibly have been a nice little Easter egg to the original film.
And I already, of course, brought up the fact that it was inspired by Jaws. It's evident in that the family name is Brody, and Brody is, of course, the name of the police officer in Jaws. So you have a very direct reference right there. Director Gareth Edwards said that he wanted the last shot of this film to be the sort of other side of the coin for Jaws, whereas in Jaws, you have the two characters who are floating back onto the shore on the barrels. In this film, instead of having two characters coming up from the water at the end, you have Godzilla going back down into the water with that final moment where, and it's a great final moment where he goes back down, and then you just have that like 2-second shot of the still water, and you're like, where'd he go?
There was one other Easter egg I remember is like, it's actually in reference to Bryan Cranston. In the opening, there's like a lot of like government documents that are being redacted or whatever. And at one point, they redact everything in there except for the names Walter and White. So obviously, a reference to Bryan Cranston's history with Breaking Bad.
Yep. Moving on to Kong. And actually, it isn't so much an Easter egg, but I really like that the opening credits of the first Godzilla and Kong Skull Island are very similar with the whole redacting stuff. And like the credits sort of going through a historical period, like in Godzilla, it's the 50s. In Kong, they're doing like the 70s. So I really like that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
And of course, I already talked about the Apocalypse Now and Heart of Darkness for Kong. Um, those are like the two big ones for that film.
You brought up last week the scene where King Kong fights a squid, and you got super excited because it seemed like it
Oh
was a
yeah,
reference to the original King Kong versus Godzilla, where King Kong fights a giant squid.
yep, yeah. That's pretty much like the film's signature Kong Easter egg right there.
Hmm. Um, there was one more. What was it that we do see skeletons of previous Kongs who have died now. It's used mainly to establish Kong as the final one, but they did do the same thing in the Peter Jackson version where we see Kong walk by skeletons of previous ones. So I don't know if that was a reference or Easter egg, but it seems like it'd be a nice little touch if it was. They at least got inspiration from.
Yeah, it's curious to. Nope, nope, never mind. Nope, I was going to go off on a thought that absolutely made no sense. Ignore me.
That's all my thoughts.
Um, I think that and then we get to King of the Monsters, and the most obvious Easter eggs in that one for people who know all the original films are the numbers of the outposts. Um, Outpost 56 is Rodan, and of course, Rodan was released in 1956. Same with Mothra as Outpost 61, and Mothra was released in 1961. Um, and the twins in King of the Monsters are a direct Easter egg towards the tiny twin fairies in the Mothra films, which is a really nice touch. I liked that.
I like that too. I also found it funny that everyone in her entire family have been twins because they did. I feel like it wasn't just that. It did seem like there was that what's the word? Mind connection between them and the Mothra. So I don't know if that was set up or just a quick throwaway reference, but it'd be nice to see that expanded upon further.
Shoot, I just watched this. Were there any other like? I mean, obviously, yes. There's the whole Ghidra coming from space is a nice nod to the old films.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Um, he was found frozen. Part of me likes to think that might have been a quick little because Godzilla was frozen in a couple of the films, wasn't he?
yeah, basically in King Kong versus Godzilla, I think it's a nice homage.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's how. Like I think I've said this already. I wish that he'd be stuck in an iceberg in this new movie, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's no precedent for that. Um, my brain is running out of Easter eggs, so we're just going to jump straight to it. How
Okay.
would you rank these three movies?
From worst to best, ooh, that's a difficulty. I probably say King of Monsters is like it has the best monster fighting, but at the same time you still get like the same, if not more, human characters that you just don't really care about. Whereas, and then I'll put the second one because yes, while there's less monster fighting, at least you're not throughout the whole film just like saying to yourself 100% of the time, please go back to the other stuff. And I'm just gonna put Kong Skull Island at the top just because I felt like it knew what it was. It delivered what it promised. It didn't promise us anything and delivers anything less. The trailers were just like it's just Kong fighting monsters in the military, which I like. And I just like the tone of that film. I felt like they had a better idea of what they wanted to do with it as opposed to King of the Monsters.
Well, your ranking actually coincides with the IMDb user ratings of these three films.
Ooh.
With King of the Monsters overall having an average of 6 out of 10 on IMDb, Godzilla with a 6.4, and Kong with a 6.6.
Nice.
I also ran a poll on Twitter. There's technically still about 90 minutes left on it, but as of right now, it's actually, I just asked which one is the favorite, and it's actually split even 3 ways at this point. For myself, I would rank them in the order that they were released. I would say my favorite's Godzilla, then Kong, then King of the Monsters, and I would actually put Kong and Godzilla like very close to each other.
Yeah.
In terms of quality. Go ahead.
I think what also helps me is like I grew up with the Peter Jackson Kong, so I have a bit more of a connection to that. And I think you have a bit more connection to Godzilla because you grew up with those films. So I think that might be influencing at least my decision a bit.
Oh yeah, personal bias always factors into these things.
Yeah.
But I wish I could say the King of the Monsters was my favorite. But it just doesn't feel like quite as cohesive of a film than those first two.
Yeah.
And
it delivers on the monster fighting, but there's not much else to keep you invested for the rest of the 2 hours.
Yep. Great monster fights. So let's talk about, like I said, we've got just a few days here. What are we looking forward to seeing in Godzilla versus Kong, apart from the obvious monster fighting? Let's get into nitty gritty. What do you want to see?
I definitely would like to see plenty of monster fight, but I don't want it to be like favoriting one side. One of my favorite parts of Freddy versus Jason is they do kind of highlight like strengths and weaknesses of each of them, and I want them to do the same with Godzilla and Kong. Show like Godzilla has his weaknesses and strengths, Kong has his own weaknesses and strengths. So that's one thing I would like to see in the fights a bit. And I would definitely like there to be plenty of fight scenes during the day, because that's one problem I've had with some of the Godzilla films. They usually film them at night, which makes it harder to make out at times, especially considering both of these characters being like darker colors, they blend into the night a bit more. So having a bit of light, I feel like, to help them see them and help tell the difference between the two characters. Because there was actually a similar problem in Endgame, where the Captain America fight, initially neither of them were wearing helmets, and the only thing that was distinguishing them was a scar, but they couldn't tell, so they had to digitally add the helmet onto 2012 Captain America. And I don't think they can do that for this film.
Nope. And actually, you bring up a good point with that, because one of the things that distinguishes Kong Skull Island from those two films is the film's big grand finale takes place in the morning. At daybreak, and you get a nice view of the fight. All of Godzilla's biggest action scenes take place, in the darkness for whatever reason, whether it's because the sun is set or it's because King Ghidorah has created a storm system over it that covers the sun.
Yeah, I love how they had to write in an explanation why it's dark for that scene.
So that's actually a good point. Because you get that in the Toho films, like the entire fight at Mount Fuji at the end of King Kong versus Godzilla is in the middle of the day. Can't miss it.
I can somewhat understand why some of these fights are at night, because from what I hear from some special effects, when it's night, it's a lot easier to animate because you don't have to worry too much about shadowing and light reflecting. But at the same time, you have two of the biggest monsters ever fighting. We want to make out what's happening. We want to see what's happening. Because like I said, my biggest fear is because they're both dark characters. Because I see from the trailers there is going to be a major fight during the night. And I'm just afraid of not being able to distinguish who is who when they're tussling with each other or whatever.
I want to know what city that's in, because it's a very well lit city. I'll give them that.
It is. And another thing I would like to see is they did establish there was a war between Kongs and Godzillas, or at least their species have interacted. They hint that in the trailers a lot. I want at least a quick flashback scene, even if it's 5 seconds, seeing 5 seconds of that war that happened in the past. That would be super awesome to see. But I'm pretty sure they're just going to keep it the one Godzilla and the one Kong.
Yeah, I'm very curious about this film. What I really don't know what I want to see, because I don't know what to expect. This is a film that's based on a ridiculous comedy. And obviously with the tone of the series they've gone so far, they're not going to go that route.
Yeah. It definitely seems like they're taking a more lighthearted route. Because, like you said, the Godzilla films, for the most part, when it came to like how the animals moved, they were very grounded and real to Earth. Whereas this upcoming film, Godzilla seems to be moving and being very agile for what we have seen him in the past do.
And I think part of that has to do with the fact that he's fighting Kong, and Kong, we've already seen, is going to be a more agile
I totally
fighter.
There is a couple of theories I want to talk about this film, and that would be interesting. So the previous Godzilla films have established Godzilla is a protector of the Earth. He doesn't destroy cities unless there's another monster that he has to stop. However, the new trailers have clearly shown Godzilla, for no reason, destroying cities. There's three possible theories that people have had. The first one being that it's not Godzilla. It's Mechagodzilla in disguise. Because there have been so many like toy leaks and other stuff, even that Mechagodzilla is going to be in the film. And so that'd be interesting to see. The other theory is, what was the other theory? At the end during the final fight in King of the Monsters, Godzilla bites off one of King Ghidorah's heads. It grows back immediately, but that head is still severed. And one of the, what were they called again? The evil agency?
I can't remember, but they're eco-terrorists.
Yeah.
So
they buy the head at the end of the film, and people theorize that they're using that head to, I think they confirmed it's part of Mechagodzilla too, but they're also theorizing that they're using his alpha call that he had in the first film to play it across the world, which is why Godzilla is destroying so many of the locations, because he's trying to find King Ghidorah. They're trying to frame him up as a bad guy so people have a reason to bring in Kong or whoever to try to fight Godzilla. And there is... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. You've got your third, right?
Yep. The third theory actually leads into why I think that Godzilla will in fact be the one to fall at the end. And that is in King of the Monsters, there's a part where Monarch finds an egg, and it hints that it's Mothra's egg, but there's also a line in the newspaper saying or is it something else? So people have theorized, could that be Godzilla's kid? Because Godzilla has had a kid in the past. And in Toho's contract, people have brought up they can't kill off Godzilla unless they introduce Godzilla's son. So that way they can go somewhere with that. And a website has recently leaked something where they didn't show an image, but in the name of it, it advertised as Manila, I believe was the name of it, which is Godzilla's son. So I don't believe, my theory is that they're going to fight, they're going to stop for whatever reason, but them being weak, and then since they're not fighting anymore, they bring in Mechagodzilla, and he starts fighting both of them, and then Godzilla falls, and they have to just stop Mechagodzilla. Sorry, trying to concentrate.
It's okay. Those theories, and theories they definitely are, because they've honestly done a really good job of keeping the story under wraps for this film. Those theories all actually make a lot of sense based on what we know from the past films. And yes, we do know, it's no longer a rumor. We do know that Mechagodzilla is in the movie. We aren't 100% sure yet in what capacity, is Mechagodzilla built by the government. It looks like he's probably being built by villains. But we're not...
Like I said, I think they established that it is by the eco-terrorists because they use Ghidorah's head as part of Mechagodzilla's body.
So, we're still not 100% sure what Mechagodzilla is quite just yet, but, it's definitely there.
It's it got to the point where they just released a trailer, all right, fine, you guys kept thinking it, here you go, here's a trailer revealing that Mechagodzilla is in it. So it's not really a spoiler point at this point.
Yeah, I believe it's the Chinese trailer that yeah, finally just blew the lid off that one. And it's not, you know, there's precedent for Mechagodzilla disguising as Godzilla. That was the original one. That was how it was introduced.
Yep.
Everyone thought, oh, it's Godzilla, and why is Godzilla running rampant? Oh, and there's two
And
Godzillas fighting each other. It's like, oh,
and wasn't it also in the original Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla they introduced his kid anyway too?
no,
Oh.
well before that, well before that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, like I said, I haven't seen these, so I've just been watching videos on
Well,
them.
actually, it depends on which series you're watching. It's in the '90s films. Godzilla's kid is introduced in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but in
Mhm.
that film, Mechagodzilla is built by the Japanese government and is defending Japan from Godzilla.
Yeah,
In the original films, Godzilla's kid first shows up in 1967, and then Mechagodzilla is 1974.
that is right. Yes.
So, yeah, it all depends on which timeline you're running with.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
oh, go ahead.
you go ahead.
Yeah, it's just because, like I said, if it wasn't for that website that had Manila's name in it, I would have called that theory just as plausible. But since they had that, that's why I'm heavily leaning that Godzilla will be the one to fall, like they tease in the posters. But again, I don't think it's going to be like Kong's going to be the one to stop them. It's like they're going to stop fighting, and then the two of them team up to fight Mechagodzilla, and then through it all, Father Godzilla falls, and then the rest of the series could follow his son.
I would like that. I would like that because it does, they've been very upfront with saying someone's going to die. And
Yeah.
of course, we all know sometimes they lie in their advertising. They've done it with Avengers, goodness knows how many times. But
It's
if,
like
if one of them falls, I hope it goes that way.
Yeah. Because I do agree with you with the Marvel thing, because like in Infinity War, Hulk was featured all over the posters, but then we follow Bruce Banner, and then Endgame, Bruce Banner's on the posters, and then we follow the Hulk.
Yep. They love tricking us.
There's always those lawyer loopholes, like, you know how like in contracts people are always trying to find the loopholes. That's how movie advertisers are.
Yep. Oh man. So yeah, we've got just a few more days. And then it's happening. It's really happening. Spoiler cast probably won't. Huh?
I'm like Michael Scott. It's happening, guys. Calm down. Everybody stay calm. Stay calm.
Spoiler cast probably won't happen for next week, but it'll probably be the week after because I've got the bonus episode currently set.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give people a week to watch it. So yeah, it should be fun though. So yeah, let's wrap things up and move on to trivia.
Trivia.
All right. It was really difficult to come up with a good trivia question for this episode. So you're probably gonna, I'm guessing you're gonna have to guess this one. But King of the Monsters director Michael Dougherty has cited which monster is his favorite monster. Is it A, Godzilla, B, Mothra, C, Rodan, or D, King Ghidorah?
I think I heard about this. I'm gonna go with Mothra.
Oh, Travis, I'm so sorry.
Ah,
The answer is Rodan.
dang it.
You know what though? When asked, the main cast of that film was also asked their favorite monsters, and I think it was Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, and Charles Dance all picked Mothra. And I think Kyle Chandler picked Godzilla. I know those three picked Mothra though, because I thought it was unusual. I thought it was an unusual choice for Charles Dance to pick Mothra. So that is our show for the week.
I just forgot something that I would want to see in the new Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla towering over Kong, and Kong going, "Save Mothra," and Godzilla going, "Why did you say that name?"
Dang it. Oh,
I had to.
yeah, yeah. It had to be done. Now, that is our show for the week. So we'll be back next week with not necessarily Godzilla, but definitely some more giant monster shenanigans going on. So, Travis, thank you once again for joining me on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Ben Stahl. Remember, you can catch the Sunday Matinee at facebook.com/Truth in Film, on Twitter at Sunday_matinee, on the blog at truthinfilm.wordpress.com. And hey, if you're watching this right now, you found us on YouTube. Congratulations! Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies if you don't like what's going on here. So yeah. On that note, everybody, have a good day.